Hi, my name is Michael Boyarchin, and I'm going to talk about another book. The other day I talked about my late wife, Jerry Wagner's collected artwork catalog, or book, if you will, that I edited, which went to number one in the category of women artists. And anyhow, before that, I edited another book, which I'm going to tell a story about. And basically, it started with my uncle Gary A. Kolanjian's opus on Armenian immigration, titled "A Kaleidoscope of Armenian Immigration to America." He'd been working on it for a great part of his adult life, and he devoted himself not just to his family, his wife, his children, his profession as a teacher, but he was also a member of the New Jersey Commission on the Holocaust under four governors of different parties, by the way. And he was a genocide scholar and risked his life at times going around the country speaking about the Armenian genocide, getting the word out about it. And he was able to live to the day to see the most powerful person in the history of human history on the planet Earth, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, acknowledged the Armenian genocide as having happened with the loss of 1.5 million Armenians. And that acknowledgement lifted a great psychological trauma, not just of immediate survivors of that genocide, most of whom passed away by now, but of following generations who were under this trauma, which was the denial of the horror, the catastrophe. And again, it wasn't so much as anything to do with reparations, but the denial that drove us crazy. But Joe Biden, President of the USA, lifted that trauma. And you know what? It took 106 years for that to happen. And did Turkey explode? No. Everything continued as is. So this could have been done 50, 75 years ago, okay? Anyhow, so I read the immigration opus written by my uncle, Gary Kolanjian, and I was so motivated that I said, let me take a look at this manuscript my mother handed me a short while after my wife Jerry passed away, and it basically was a typewritten manuscript with no page numbers. I had no idea what it was about. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? It wasn't even in an envelope. It was in a folder. Anyhow, I had other things to deal with at that time, and I tucked it away in the closet. And it kept, I kept moving it around here and there. It was always around me. It was sort of like that John Irving book, Hotel New Hampshire, Sorrow Floats. Well, this manuscript kept floating around me. And it was written by her cousin, the late Ed Tabibian. Anyhow, that's all I knew. Anyhow, because of being inspired by my uncle's great book on Armenian immigration to the United States, I said, let me take a look at that manuscript. I pulled it out, and I started reading it. And my God, I've read a lot of travel books, both Jerry and I, and we know our travel books. I'm talking Bill Bryson, I'm talking Paul Theroux, on and on and on and on. I could go down the list. You know the big time travel. I'm right down to Mark Twain in Innocents Abroad. But it was fascinating. I couldn't put it down. The problem was I am incapable of typing a typewritten manuscript into a Word document. I can't. It's too big. So I said, well, wait a minute. This is the modern era here. Let me see if my Apple phone has an app. And sure enough, it had an Adobe app that allowed you to scan the document into a word processing file, which you can load up to your laptop and take it from there. It took 10 minutes. Let me put it that way. The app cost $2, and the whole process took 10 minutes. And that's like the research I did for the Roman Armenia book. What would have normally taken years, it took about 10 minutes to pull up all the citations and the primary sources on the Roman Armenian topic among the Greek and Roman books of that 2,500 years ago, whatever. But anyhow, so yes. So, and again, but it wasn't perfect. Some of it was scrambled, so I had to go through it. And it was a bit tedious, page by page by page, and make sure everything was correct. It did a fantastic job. And even with all the work I had to do, it was still 10 times easier than trying to even type this thing over again. Anyhow, what is the book about? It's about Ed and his wife Phyllis in 1971 traveling by car in a British sports car that's no longer made. It went out of production later in the 70s. I think it was called a Morris. And they drove from London to India. The plan actually was to drive from London to Australia. Now, of course, they would be taking ferries through Southeast Asia and on into Australia. However, they ended up ending at India because of trouble in Southeast Asia at their main hub, which would take them to Australia. So they ended up having to sell the car, and fly from India to Australia, and that ended their trip. Now, Ed is a brilliant travel writer, and for 1971, it is fairly politically correct. And there's one scene near the end in India where when I push the button, let me roll back up. I said in the editor's overview before Ed's book began, that I'm not tampering with any of the language here or making it politically correct, as you would not do to, say, Mark Twain's Huck Finn. Okay, so anything in there stayed in there, and luckily he was fairly politically correct, but for one scene in India, which I was like, my friend Veed, who was born in India and is a major figure in the education world here in the United States, I said, "Dad, please forgive me," as I pushed the button to load that horrible passage up. But it had to be told. It's in his author said it that way. And again, you got to remember, it's 1971. And things have changed. It's through much of the world he traveled through with Phyllis, and much hasn't changed. What Ed did, as I said earlier, that he was so brilliant, was that he left out the section on which is routine. Most travelers have been to Europe, so he left that out. There was nothing new to be told there between London and Turkey. So his book basically is his travels, and this is 1971, through Turkey, through Iran, through Afghanistan, through Pakistan, into India. And they just made it into India as hostilities were breaking out between Pakistan and India. Otherwise, the border would have been closed. And it's before the Iranian Revolution, so they had no problem getting into Iran. I had a problem getting a photograph. Ed Tabibian is a riot. This is 1971. He's doing the same thing I used to do when traveling and coming upon a body of water, is either put my foot in or feel it with my hand. Like the Pacific Ocean, San Diego, up in San Francisco, Sunset Beach, or Dahini Beach down in down there, Orange County, on and on and on. He did the same thing when he got to the Caspian Sea, and he did that to other bodies of water. He said, that was fascinating. Someone else was doing that crazy thing I was doing, and anyhow, I wanted to get a picture of the Iranian beach on the Caspian Sea. I had major problems trying to get that. There's public domain, it does not exist there. And I'm like, all right, you know what I'm going to do? I downloaded public domain from the International Space Station, a photograph of the entire Caspian Sea. Okay? Case closed. Anyhow, moving on. So it's a terrific story, and it had to see the light of day. And so I published it. The copyright is in the name of the family and all the cousins and their families of Ed Tabibian. People went wild over it, because again, it's nothing to do with me. I just brought it into the public of view. A great manuscript that would have been lost in the ash heap of history, just as my wife's artwork would have been if I had not pulled it out and cleaned it up after she passed away, distributed some of it, put it up on the walls, and turned it into a book in the end, which went to #1 last week. Anyhow, so Ed Tabibian's book on his travels, it reminded me of a book my wife Jerry gave me years ago by a Muslim author, Ibn Battuta. And to call him the Mark Twain of the Muslim world is an injustice. Not Mark Twain, excuse me, Marco Polo. Marco Polo is the Ibn Battuta of the Italian world, Renaissance world, okay? This Ibn Battuta was one of the greatest travel writers ever, and he traveled far more than any other travel writer at that time. And so I incorporated Ibn into the title of the book. But basically it's that journey through Asia by Ed Tabibian and Phyllis. And the ending's going to surprise you. I couldn't believe it myself. I'm like, what? Oh my God, I'm not even, look, I'm not going to give the ending away. But it's a terrific book, and I hope you enjoy it. And take care.